I'd like to welcome today Tanuj Deora from Uplight. Tanuj is their Vice President of Market Innovation and has a lot of information to share with us about his views and his company's work on COVID-19. So Tanuj, I'd like to start with a question for you to ask you to tell us about your organization and what your role is there.
Sure, thanks Patty. It's a pleasure to join you today. So our company is Uplight. We're actually a relatively young company. We were the product of a merger of six different companies actually, back in July of last year, where we all came together. And the key element that we bring together is we believe that digital customer engagement will allow for utilities and other energy providers to provide for a better customer experience, primarily a set of connected customer journeys that will allow the utilities to better deploy behind the meter technologies, things like energy efficiency and demand response in particular, but other technologies as well, EVs, distributed generation, storage, and the like, so that we can optimize for both the customer and the utility across the meter, with a real key focus on reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from the energy sector. Uplight's actually a public benefit corporation. We're a certified B Corp. And so not only are we a for-profit corporation for our shareholders, but we also have a commitment to our mission of driving decarbonization and enabling consumer savings.
Tanuj, as you know, we're in the midst of a pandemic and a resulting recession, and these are some really trying times for residential consumers. So I'd like to ask you, how has Uplight or how are your clients working through these difficult times? What sorts of solutions are you offering, or are you working with your clients to offer consumers to help them deal with this time that we're in as a society?
Yeah, great question, Patty. This has been a challenge across the economy, and obviously the energy sector has faced that as well. The first thing was just a real question to understand in this time, what messaging, what communication to the end user, the utilities, our client's client, what messaging is appropriate there. And some of our questions were, should we continue our messaging and behavioral energy efficiency and our marketing for the DSM devices like smart thermostats and the like? Some clients were, please hold off. Some clients were, nope, steady as she goes. Other clients asked us how we could better engage with them to tweak the messages or more precisely scope the messages to be relevant at this time. And so we worked pretty aggressively with them. The next thing we did was, after we had a few weeks of the shutdowns and the stay-at-home orders, we were able to look at the data and see what was actually happening with commercial energy demand, residential energy demand, overall energy demand. And we found some really interesting things. First off, obvious, I think, to everyone is that commercial demand went down, residential demand went up. The net was overall demand went down. But what we found was we could very specifically figure out how much demand is going up per sector and where, and how much of it's energy and how much of it's actually demand charge. So what we found was pretty much across the board, there was a 20 to 30% increase in residential demand for energy, which makes sense, right? It's people are staying at home. But we also found that demand was peakier. We actually had a worse load factor, and we saw an increase in the kilowatts themselves go up a little bit more than the energy demand. So about 20 to 30% increase in overall demand itself. And then we were able to go through and do some analytics on where that was happening and how the shift was occurring. So in some places we were seeing a shift 2 hours earlier in the peak. Some places we're seeing shifts 2 hours later. And we were able to figure out that a lot of it had to do with the utilities service territory, how much residential, how much commercial, how much industrial they actually had in their system. And then there were some things that defied any immediate obvious hypothesis. Service territories looked very similar, but actually saw some of those shifts. And we're working with clients to unpack some of that. It'll be really interesting to see what happens as we get our data from the cooling season that we're in right now as the temperatures are getting hotter.
Let me move on from the economic pain points that consumers are feeling to the cultural moment that we find ourselves in with the Black Lives Matter movement and the social equity issues that are being debated in our industry now. I'd like to know what your views are, what Uplight is doing around these issues, and what do you think can or should be done for consumers, especially communities of color, related to these issues?
Yeah, Patty, thanks. That's a real challenge. I think that we'd like to think that we were all doing the right thing when it comes to social equity, and I think what we've seen over the past few months was a reminder that it probably deserves a little more focus than we've given it in the past. The first question for us, we're a software company. We're based in Boulder, Colorado. We looked around at our team and we said, wow, we've always tried to drive for inclusion. There's probably more that we can do. And there's a set of cultural things that we're looking at and an investment in recruiting as well to see how we can create a more inclusive workforce, because we do believe diversity is a strength for us. And we want diversity not only in the places where we work, but we want diversity so that we have all the views for the types of people we're serving, our end users and our utility clients. So that was step one. And that's something that is ongoing and we're really making an investment in. The second thing that we did was our leadership really believes that for this to be authentic, it has to be grassroots. And what that means is we're not going to write a check. We're not going to, we'll do some of that stuff too, but it's not about just writing a check or making a statement. It really is more fundamentally allowing employees the space to do things on their own. And so we've carved out some time for our employees, whether it's volunteering, whether it's social activism, whatever it is, to do so in a way that allows them to be authentic and be able to do what they can do on their own. And then the third thing that we did that I think is the most profound, I'm most excited about, is that we're looking at our products and services. What we do is we provide the ability for utilities to better deliver their services to their end customers. And there's a real question that we hadn't even thought to ask really before of, are our solutions bias free? Are our solutions part of a equity solution, or are they part of the equity challenge? I just, as an aside, read a book called Weapons of Math Destruction. I'd recommend that book by a woman named Cathy O'Neill. Check it out if you have time. And it suggested that many of our algorithms, as opposed to being, they're intended to be bias free, they may actually be creating, not ours Uplight, but our society, they may be actually perpetrating bias. And so we've made a commitment to start looking at how our products and services are performing across a variety of market segments to see, is there an issue? And if there is an issue, how can we best turn our products to be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem?
So I'm going to move on now to customer pain points. And you've covered that a little bit, but let me ask you just a little bit more directly. What challenges do you feel or do you think or know that customers are having related to these times that we're in, particular pain points that you're aware of?
Yeah, thanks, Patty. Great question. So we know for sure that there are some customers who are experiencing higher bills, or many customers are experiencing higher bills because they're at home more. Their kids aren't at school, they're not at work, they can't go out to dinner. There's folks that are just at the house more, and so the direct energy payments they have to make are going to be greater. And so we've been worried at the same time, there's a limit on what they naturally can do. You're not going to bring in an outside contractor to come in and do an energy audit. Anything that's discretionary, you're going to wait and hold off on. And so we've been working with making sure that we're enabling our clients to be able to offer things like remote online assessments or changing our messaging in the behavioral energy efficiency space to make sure that it is more relevant to the specific things that are happening right now. So a lot of it has been just trying to understand with our UX experts and our CX experts in the company to say, hey, how can we make sure that we're delivering better value in terms of a more relevant messaging? So that's the first start. The second bit is more of a passive role or of a support role in helping our clients as they're thinking about the utilities are now potentially facing some financial challenges when it comes to they have a reduction in commercial load, an increase in residential load, but they're still going through some periods of moratoria from doing shutoffs. Now, generally, the utility doesn't like a shutoff. We don't want to be encouraging more shutoffs. What we want to be doing is trying to help avoid utilities from having to make that choice with their customers. And so we're working on a creative set of products where we can try to provide some more certainty in billing and a number of solutions that help the utilities better be able to manage those challenges.
Okay. So let me move on to some big picture discussions about the state of the industry. Coal production is anticipated to fall about 25% in 2020. What are your thoughts about whether this time that we're in will make any accelerations or shifts to that, or increases in renewable energy, or more focus on climate change? Any views that you might have on that?
Yeah, thanks, Patty. I think that's the trickiest question you've asked so far. I don't have a crystal ball where I can say, I think this is the future necessarily, or a particular set of insight in any of the customer research that we've done just yet. That we are doing some research, and I know SECC is doing some research that we're excited to be members and get to take a look at. But if I was to prognosticate at this time, there does seem to be, based on what we're seeing in the media, based on what we're hearing from our clients, based on anecdotal evidence, an increased awareness of concerns about community. As we face a collective challenge, historically, we have come together collectively as a country and as communities. I know it doesn't feel like that with the political season that we're in an election year. At times, it can feel like there's real challenges, but it does appear, and especially this is independent of some of the things that have happened with COVID, but it does appear that there's a louder voice, across the political spectrum for us to take action on climate. There does appear to be increasing momentum to be more aggressive with those who have said, hey, we should do something on climate, to actually be more aggressive in terms of what those goals and targets are going to be. And part of that has shown up politically in some of the platforms and proposals and congressional reports that have come out. And a big part of that is just in the nature of the conversation, continued momentum for folks to say, there are some issues where we're all in this together. And whether it be helping our communities and our neighbors and our favorite restaurants and small businesses during this challenging time, or whether it be thinking more broadly about what the impacts of climate change could have on our communities. It's a reminder that we need to take this seriously, that we're all in this together. And there is a real value in focusing there.
Got it. Well, thank you, Tanuj. That's all that we have for you today. You've been very helpful and very insightful, and we appreciate your participation in our COVID-19 interview series. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for all the great work you guys are doing at SECC.